Welcome, everyone, once again to our study of Omniscient Jigme Lingpa's Treasury of Precious Qualities, together with the commentary from Kangyur Rinpoche. So we'll begin with invoking the wisdom body of Jigme Lingpa, the source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable. Emanation of Longchenpa, heir to a treasury of mind tellers, sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity. Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So we're presently in the section of refuge, in which we're looking at the qualities of the three jewels, and we've particularly looked at the qualities of the three jewels because we generate the appreciation for the qualities of the three jewels because of this is our refuge. So in view of the pain and the nature of suffering of samsara, we go for refuge, we go for safety. We find safety in the three jewels. And this is where we find safety in someone who no longer is confused about the nature of reality, who no longer is confused in any way. And this is what we then refer to in the omniscient one, the Buddha, the fully awakened one. Someone who has seen through delusion, awoken. And that's where we then take as the path, we listen to the Buddha as the means of ourselves, emulating the Buddha and training ourselves in cutting through the confusion just like the Buddha did. We follow his guidance. And that we do through the practice of the Dharma. And we do so together with the companions on the spiritual path, those who might not be fully enlightened, but who nevertheless aspire to and have accomplished the qualities of the path. So we have these three jewels that are the universally all across the Buddhist traditions. These are what we call the object of refuge. This is where we find safety from the suffering of samsara. And so we're looking at the qualities of these to appreciate the qualities of the Buddha. And last time we looked then at the various ways in which we appreciate the qualities in order to first generate this appreciation for the Buddha, then the wish to emulate the Buddha, the discovery of the qualities from within our own experience, and then irreversible faith arises. And so we looked at quite in some detail. That's where I have to confess I must capitulate with regards to some of the categories that are being described there. And we're now looking at the Dharma, the second jewel. And so that's where we understand Dharma in terms of we looked at last time. One is that is the I'm just going to go over this again. The term Dharma covers three areas. First, it signifies virtuous actions or skillful means, such as generosity. So that's what we mean with Dharma. To practice the Dharma, that's doing practice like that. Generosity, the practice of the paramitas, meditation, so forth. Second, it signifies the path, which in turn refers to the wisdom of realizing the absence of self. So that's the very nature of what we're doing. Third, it signifies nirvana, the freedom from obscuration that results from following the path. So these are what we refer to as the Dharma of transmission. And this says for the nature of Dharma is twofold. On the one hand, it is the supreme resultant state, free from all stains. On the other, it is the very activity that eliminates these stains. So we can talk about the Dharma as reality, but it's also that the path which enables us to realize reality. So that's where Kangyur Rinpoche comments, the two aspects of Dharma correspond to the two truths of perfect purity, namely the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. So when we have the Four Noble Truths, we have the truth of suffering, the condition of samsara. And we understand that doesn't just happen. It happens due to particular causes that we can work with, we can eliminate. And that's why we would say the ground nature is free from confusion. And the result of eliminating confusion is that we uncover this ground nature, that which always was. And that's the Dharma of cessation. And then there's the Dharma of the path. So here we think of the Dharma in terms of that which is reality and that which facilitates us to realize that. So there's two kinds of Dharma as it comes down to us. So one is the sort of the definition of Dharma, right? But then there's the Dharma that we are the recipients of, what we could call Buddhism. And that's where we have, of course, the Buddhist teaching, and that's called the Dharma of transmission. And then we also have what is extraordinary. We have living embodiments of awakening, teachers, not just theory, even though the theory is brilliant. Then we also have the manifest result of the practice of the path, which are the great teachers, those that possess realization. So then they're beginning with first the Dharma of transmission. Kangyur Rinpoche comments, the Dharma of transmission and realization may be discussed in terms of the three collections of the teachings of Tripitaka and the three trainings set forth therein. So the Tripitaka are the three baskets of the Buddha's teachings, the Vinaya, the Sutra, and the Abhidharma. The teachings on lifestyle or particular discipline, monastic discipline to a large degree, the sutras, the spiritual instructions from the Buddha, and Abhidharma, the science of reality, phenomenology, if you like, all the knowledge that we could have about what we could call samsara and nirvana. And then we have the teachings, or rather the trainings that come from when we apply this, then we apply three sets of teachings again, or three trainings that correspond to these, namely discipline, meditation, and wisdom. So now we're looking at the first of the two kinds of Dharma that reach us, namely the Dharma of the theory, or the books, or the heritage, or the sort of the information. So that's where we then look at Jigme Lingpa's stanza 8. And he writes, the sacred writings in 12 branches of the Dharma of transmission, which arranged as antidotes become the three collections, and also the collection of Vijayadharas endowed with greater means. And since the scriptures all consist of syllables, the latter are the basis of our pledges. The Dharma then of realization holds within it, step by step, the qualities contained in the five paths, beginning with the four close mindfulnesses. It is the primal wisdom of elimination and realization. So when we talk about the Dharma of transmission, we sometimes see it classified in terms of 12 branches, 12 sections. When it comes to us applying this, then we talk about these three collections, the three baskets, the Tripitaka. But particularly within the Vajrayana, we talk about a fourth basket, Rinzin Kidenu, the collection of the Vijayadharas. And that's seen as the teachings that have, as Jigme Lingpa here says, much greater means. It's the resultant vehicle that sees clearly the nature of reality, and this becomes the foundation for the path. So we talk about this being the scope of great beings, but this is also then the very core of the Vajrayana teachings. So on the basis of all of these, then we commit ourselves to the practice, and this brings about the various stages of development in the path. Essentially, what we call the five paths: the path of accumulation, the path of joining, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. And these are sometimes explained at what we call the 37 aspects of enlightenment, which begins then with the four close mindfulnesses, then we have the 4 abandonings and so forth. There's 37 in all. But all of this, the whole Dharma, the whole nature of the path, boils down to essentially eliminating what was, you could say, superimposed on our nature, the confusion that veils the nature, and that's what is eliminated. When we see clearly, we're no longer caught by this confusion. That is what the path provides, namely the elimination of confusion and bringing about realization of what was always there. So we very often would define then the Dharma in terms of the path in terms of these 2 qualities, elimination and realization. So Kangyur Rinpoche comments, the Dharma of transmission may be subdivided in various ways. Arising from the dominant condition, namely the Tathagata himself, it is perceived by beings as the 12 branches of the sacred scripture, the sutras, poetic epitome, and so forth. Okay. Dominant condition, we talk about various kinds of causes and conditions, and let's just see how we define that. See note 114. Okay. Let's just do it. No. Note 114, and where might I find that? Let's see here. Okay. So in general, this is in a different context, but these are what we call the dominant condition is one of what we call the 4 conditions. So these are then described here in terms of the 4 boundless attitudes, but they're basically these 4: the causal condition, the dominant condition, the objective condition, and the immediately preceding condition. So we can see how any given phenomenon is based on, you could say, a particular primary cause. Let's say we have an apple seed, then we have something that enables the apple seed, which is the ground, and then the tending to this is then the objective condition, and then all the sort of the circumstances that bring about then when finally the apple blossoms is then what we call the immediate preceding conditions. So these 4 essentially constitute then the, let's just see here if we can find our way back. These then are ways in which the Buddha comes about, namely that there is Buddha nature, and then there's the circumstances of the path and so forth. So let's see what footnote 84 says to us. The 12 branches, the scriptures are, okay. Let's see here. Sorry. Okay, just for our reference, these are then the 12 branches. Sungrap, Yenla, Chunyi. They are Dode, Sutra, discourses on a single topic. For example, now when we have the 84,000, you're going to see so many different sutras in there. And these basically are these particular discourses on various themes. Basically, the Buddha's word. Yangnye, a poetic epitome or summaries in verse of teachings existing at greater length in prose. So this we sometimes have from the commentators. Then we have Lungten, prophecies. These we have from the Buddha, but also from other great masters. Thikche, discourses in verse, which we have, for example, from the likes of Nagarjuna. Chedujeba, teachings not requested by anyone, but spoken intentionally by the Buddha in order to propagate the Dharma. Lengshi, instructions given in the context of specific events. And that's where we have, yes, for example, there's some of we have, it's interesting in the Vinaya, we talk about the 5 naughty ones, and they were 5 students who helped the Dharma a lot by just getting it all wrong, and hence the Buddha set down some rules so that you could say it became more clear what you had to do and not to do. Then we have Tokje, life stories of certain contemporaries of the Buddha. Then you have Ditabu Jungwa, so that's historical accounts. Then we have Kira, the Jataka tales, previous lives of the Buddha. Shinto Jeba, long expositions of the vast and profound teachings. And these are then teachings on, say, Prajna, Paramita, and Madhyamika, and so on. And Mejung, extraordinary, unprecedented expositions of the profound teachings, also profound teachings on the Madhyamika, and so on. And then Temba, topics of specific knowledge that clinch the meaning of all the Vinaya and the Sutras, the classification of samsara phenomena such as aggregates, dhatus, and ayatanas, the outline of the phenomena of the path, grounds, and paths of realization, concentration, and the enumeration of the phenomena of result, kayas, wisdom, etc. So this sounds like it more belongs to the Abhidhamma. Anyway, this is one way of classifying the Buddha's teaching. And then Kangyur Rinpoche says, and when these 5 branches are systematized in terms of antidotes to the 3 poisons, one arrives at the Tripitaka, namely the Vinaya, the Sutra, and the Abhidhamma, where we would say that the Vinaya, it's the antidote for desire, the Sutra, the antidote for anger, and the Abhidhamma, the antidote for ignorance. Finally, even more profound than the Tripitaka and endowed with even more skillful means is the Pitaka of the Vijayadharas, and we would say they actually condense all these. This is, you could say, the 4th basket contains the antidote for all 3 poisons. And it says here in the Kunshe Gyalpo, the Tantra, it says, as a remedy for craving, 21,000 sections of the Vinaya were set forth. As a remedy for anger, 21,000 sections of the Sutra were set forth. As a remedy for ignorance, 21,000 sections of the Abhidhamma were set forth. For Vijayadharas, over all the rest, and as the all-subduing remedy, the 20,000 sections of the 4th collection were set forth. So we have these 4, and we sometimes would then say, when we talk about 84,000 teachings, they then, like it says here, they each constitute 21,000 sections. So let's just see the footnote. Let's see. The presentation of the 4 Pitakas is asserted also by Aryadeva, Longchenpa, Terdak Lingpa, and others. Some consider that this collection of the Mantrayana is included in the Abhidhamma. So it's interesting when we talk about the Buddha's teachings, they also do contain teachings that belong then to the Vijayadhara Pitaka, the Vajrayana teachings. We find tantras in the words of the Buddha. So this is important that we don't think that that's sort of something that came later or is sort of an addition and so forth. The basis for the composition of the scriptures is the letters or syllables which combine to make words and so on to form phrases and sentences. Sentences are grouped together in stanzas, shlokas. These form chapters, sections, and volumes. The scriptures therefore consist of collections of letters, which thus form the basis of the refuge commitment. And this is important because when we engage with the teaching, we understand that this is language. So the absolute nature of the teaching obviously lies beyond language. But we appreciate the role of the Dharma, and we appreciate the phenomenon of language. And we appreciate, you could say, the conventions that are basic to language. So that's where the language has, even though it's understood as, you could see, being the finger that points to the moon, it nevertheless is regarded as sacred. It can bring about liberation. And for that reason, the letters, the scriptures, and so on are considered sacred. By the way, if ever you come across the situation of statues which represent the body and scriptures that represent the speech is more important. When you have statues and scriptures, you would never put a statue on top of a book. You would also never put your mala on top of a book. You would never put anything on top of the books. There's a saying that goes, Sungi Toktu Kuma Sha, which is never place the body on top of the speech. And that's why, because we would say the statues, they can convey blessings. I mean, we have statues that speak and so forth, but we would say the scriptures, they can convey awakening. So scriptures are regarded as particularly sacred, and also once we take refuge in the Buddha's teaching, we actually would regard all language as sacred. Now, this we sometimes interpret as meaning the Buddha's teachings, but for some also it refers to any kind of language or any kind of letters. So we would typically say, once you've taken refuge in the Buddha's teaching, you would never step over, let's say, a book. You'd never put a book on the ground and so forth. But the sanctity of the letters even could be taken to mean anything. We wouldn't even put newspapers. For some lamas, some of my teachers, they would actually, when they buy shoes, they would actually carve out. They would cut out the places where it might say, you know, Echo or Made in China or whatever it might be. They would actually cut that out to not step on top of letters. The letters are regarded as particularly sacred. And of course, why they become sacred is because they are the vehicle in which the Dharma is communicated. Of course, there's all sorts of things that are being communicated in letters that are not Dharma, but nevertheless, there is this appreciation for letters universally. So that's the letter, that's the Dharma of transmission, essentially what we could call the 84,000 teachings, but also the commentaries that come with that. So we have many different teachings, such as the Shastras, the commentaries by great masters. We also have all the pith instructions, the Upadeshas that come down to us. So all the scriptures. Now, the Dharma realization. And Jigme Lingpa, he writes, the Dharma then of realization holds within it, step by step, the qualities contained in the 5 paths, beginning with the 4 closed mindfulnesses. It is the I'm reckoning I have a little bit of, let me just check, let me just find out here. Let's just see here, what is this? What's this place? Hello, page 226, location 4270. Please remember that, 4270. Okay, let's go and look at the root text. Yeah. All right. Okay. So in fact, there was a little bit of there was an overlap in what I was reading before. I have to correct that. But anyway, here then, the 9th one here, yeah, that makes more sense. It's kind of a little bit of the repetition of what we saw before. It says the Dharma then of realization holds within it step by step the qualities contained in the 5 paths. Beginning with the 4 closed mindfulnesses, it is the primal wisdom of illumination and realization, possessed by noble beings. It is the Buddha nature. It is the generation and perfection stages, the Dharanis and unbounded ayatanas, and all the contents of the 4 paths of learning and the paths of no more learning. This Dharma, therefore, is the primal wisdom present in the minds of those abiding on the 10 grounds of the causal vehicle and all the boundless grades of realization of the Vajrayana, the 13 levels of fruition and the rest. So what we're saying here is the actual experience. One is the Dharma, which is the theory, the instructions. The other is the Dharma realization that takes place in terms of the development of the 5 paths. And this then includes all what we could call the phenomena of nirvana, the the purity of phenomena, as for example, when we talk about the generation and perfection stages, this is the visualization or the recognition of the purity of phenomena, which is the scope of the generation stage, and the equality of samsara and nirvana, the space of absolute reality, which is then the scope of the perfection stage. And within this, then, all the various qualities of the path as well as realization, they are present in those that possess realization. So this is then let's see if we can use this one here. Does this work? Nah, I don't think so. Or maybe? Nah. Okay, go on to, what was it, 4270? Yeah. Okay. So the Dharma realization. Dharma realization refers to all the qualities to be gained on the 5 paths, from the path of accumulation onward. So again, to repeat, these are the path of joining, path of accumulation, path of joining, path of seeing, path of meditation, and the path of normal learning. Kangyur Rinpoche says, for example, in the lesser path of accumulation, the Dharma realization refers to the 4 close mindfulnesses. In the middle path of accumulation, it refers to the 4 genuine restraints, Yang Dakpa Pangwa. And in the great path of accumulation, it refers to the 4 bases for miraculous powers and so forth. Juntrulki Kangpa Shi. In addition, the Dharma realization refers to the wisdom resulting from elimination and realization, which suffuses the minds of supreme beings. So of course there's the path, the five paths that anyone progressing through the path to awakening naturally proceeds through. But what really is the nature and the goal of the path is then this elimination of confusion and realization of the abiding reality. And that is then what, like it says here, what suffuses the minds of supreme beings. Kangyur Rinpoche says, now all the qualities of the path and of wisdom are nothing but the actualization of what is already the essential nature of the mind, the Tathagata Gaba. So this is wonderful news. We're not constructing something, we're simply just becoming what we always were. Rather, we're uncovering the natural dispositions that's uncontaminated with the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering. So that's where we appreciate that we possess this nature from the very origin, the Tathagata Gaba, or the Buddha nature. These qualities, the qualities of the path, the qualities of awakening, Tathagata Gaba, these qualities are not causally produced as something new and extraneous, for the ultimate nature is actualized in no other way than by the elimination or removal of obscurations. So that's where, if you following the glimpses of the profound, also there's this quote from Jetsun Taranatha, who says that all sentient beings, they possess from the very origin all the qualities of enlightenment perfectly, just as if and also in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, in the teachings on Buddha nature, we talk about the 4 examples of Tathagata Gaba, where one is that there's a statue inside a mold. The moment that we remove the mold, nothing has been added, but we see all the qualities of this perfect statue within. When the mold is still there, there's nothing lacking in the statue. It's just not perceived. So that's where, when we eliminate then the obscurations, when we remove the mold, we simply see what was always there. So these qualities, they're not causally produced. Now, there's sometimes a little bit of discussion in terms of how it might appear from someone who progresses through the gradual path. But here we're simply talking about how the nature abides in and of itself, regardless of whether there's someone who has experienced it or not. It says here, then Kangyur Rinpoche says, in the Mantrayana, these obscurations are removed by following the profound pith instructions, which lead straight to the true reality of body, speech, and mind. And that's why in the Mantrayana teachings, we introduce the pure body, pure speech, pure mind, and abide by that through the practice of sadhana. And this is then deepened through the practice of the four empowerments. Kangyur Rinpoche says, in the generation stage practice, which is conceptual, the practitioner meditates on the three seats of the deities. Here, which are then this. The mandala of the three seats, this, by the way, is rather important. If you're a practitioner of sadhana, this is the way in which everything is understood in terms of purity. And when we say everything, that's why it's quite helpful to have some grounding in the Abhidharma and understand the concepts of the Abhidharma and the way in which we can map and understand the phenomena of our experience. But that's why it says, the mandala of the three seats, Densum Tsangwe Kyukur, is one. The aggregates and elements, which are the seat of the male and female Jnani Buddhas, or what we call the five Buddha families, and the aggregates, five skandhas and the five elements. The aggregates being the male Buddhas, the elements being the female Buddhas. Essentially what we could identify as subject and object. The experiencer, which in its filtered through its confused condition are the five skandhas of a sentient being, and free from this filter of confusion, then naturally there is the disposition with all the wisdoms of the five Buddhas. And also there is then the experience of space, which in the condition of a sentient being are the five elements, and within the condition of someone that's freed from that, understood in terms of the five spaces or the five lights. So these are then, you could say, the aggregates and elements that are pure. And we would say it's then there where reside the male and female Buddhas. They're not out there somewhere. They abide as the intrinsic purity of the skandhas and the elements, the aggregates and the elements. That's where you can find the five Buddhas. You can't start going out there and finding the Buddhas out there somewhere, you know? They're right here within the nature of who we are. And that's what we meditate then on in the Mantrayana. Then there's the sense organs and their objects, which are the seat of the male and female bodhisattvas. And again, has to do with our consciousnesses that are generated on the basis of that we have, for example, eyes, and then we have a field in which we perceive objects. And these again, on the level of ordinary sentient being, then we have the various experiences of consciousnesses and their objects. And that's where then we talk about the ayatanas, in which we talk about the various ways in which conscious experience is generated on the basis of subject, object, and the organ, the object, and then the consciousness that's generated on the basis of that. This is very important and something also that's very much a theme and discussed within contemporary physics, which is the understanding of qualia. How is it that we generate the understanding of, or the perception of substance out there, when in fact all we have is really just an infinite field of energy and possibilities. So that's where we understand that when we experience, when we have an experience which is the scope of our consciousness, it can be one of seeing, hearing, or whatever, then that is generated on the basis of an organ, eye, for example, and an object. And then on the basis of that interaction, then there's a consciousness that is generated. So these are called the ayatanas. And then finally, we have what we call the bodily members, which are the seat of the wrathful male and female deities. And that's again within the physical body. We talk about various places in which then the protectors of the body, and we talk about various places in the body then in which that protects our intrinsic sanity. And that's where sometimes in yoga practice we block particular places on the basis of understanding how the nadis and so on are entrances for particular styles of confusion, thoughts of the three times, various kinds of extreme views. And these then in their pure nature are then seen as the wrathful male and female deities, the four gatekeepers and their consorts. Now I emphasize this a little bit because there will be those who practice sadhana. For example, in Siddhartha's intent, many people practice, let's say, Jigme Lingpa or the Vimaladrub, in which there's continually references to this. That's where it's quite helpful to actually understand what it is that we're reading there. So just going over then the nature of the Dharma of realization in the generation stage practice, which is conceptual. The practitioner meditates on the three seats of the deities, and that's where we keep in mind that phenomena are pure, and we do this on the basis of visualization to just recall the purity of things. Thus, it says, thus causing the co-emergent primordial wisdom to arise. So it creates the condition for the ordinary perception to essentially be invalidated, seen for what it is, and shed, and the seed, the conditions for seeing the purity is established. And then it says, through the perfection stage practice, which is non-conceptual, the primordial wisdom is cultivated, together with the dharanis of unforgetfulness, the 10 limitless ayatanas, and the 9 successive absorptions, and so forth. Let's see here what that, I don't know what the, see Appendix 9. I might leave that, I have to say, I'll go back over it, but I think just for the time being, we might just targi, Targinepe, Nyomjuku. These consist of 4 samadhis of form and the 4 formless absorption and the absorption of cessation. These are slightly specific, so I'm going to leave that, if you forgive me. Therefore, the Dharma of realization comprises all the qualities possessed by beings abiding by the main practices of the path of learning, which are the first 4 paths, the path of accumulation, joining, seeing, and meditation. And basically, these are the 4 paths that anyone practicing go through. And then the last one is enlightenment itself. That's called, and also the path of no more learning. That's Buddhahood. So sometimes we can define the path in terms of 4 paths, the first 4, because that's where you're actually doing something. The last is really just the result, where there's nothing more left to be done. But it is referred to as a path. Okay. Can you please explain the 4 paths in the context of the 3 seats? Well, that's different because the 4 paths refer to the path of progression in which we gradually realize the nature. But the 3 seats, that's a way of conceptually understanding the nature. So that's where we understand all the nature of what we could call relative truth, or actually what's called the higher relative truth, which is seeing all phenomena in terms of the 3 seats, or in terms of purity. So that's where we say the higher relative truth is the vision of purity, which is then the vision of the 3 seats. And it's on the basis of that, and then we would say the higher absolute truth is then the equality of samsara and nirvana. So that's how we understand the 2 truths in the Vajrayana context, and that's where we have this discussion of the 3 seats. When we talk about the 4 paths, that's the way that we gradually generate the realization of these of the 2 truths, basically. Yeah. Okay. The grounds or stages of realization. Okay. Here we're going to be going into some detail about the 10 grounds, but this is something that you're going to be coming across. And so this is something that we continually come across in terms of the Mahayana, namely the understanding of the 10 bhumis. And we're also going to be looking at some of the other stages on the path. Okay. I still don't understand how an object sensed by an organ and a signal sent to the brain actually produces the experience of it being known. And also the knowing of the knowing. Is there a Buddhist explanation for specifically how consciousness is produced, or is consciousness considered to be the actual most basic material of the universe? Actually, all of that. This is very good. I mean, looking into this is looking into the topics that we discuss in Abhidharma and also Pramana. If you're following the Pramana course, for example, the knowing of the knowing is what we call reflexive awareness. And that's what we call a direct, non-conceptual perceiver. It's something that we know. Actually, it's the only thing we really know. The fact that we are continually experiencing, right? And that's where your last remark there, consciousness is considered to be the actual most basic material of the universe, that applies when it comes to relative truth. So everything that we perceive, all our various perceptions, so on, consists of a web of dependent arising phenomena, and that we call relative truth. They appear, and yet they have no enduring reality. They haven't even really come into production because they don't inherently exist. And this is such an important point, but it's the mind that gets that right or gets it wrong. And it's the mind that experiences samsara and nirvana. So we are talking about consciousness, yes, being the most basic material of, well, we could say the universe, but that's kind of abstract. What is the universe? It's the most basic to our experience. What we can validate, verify on the basis of our own immediate experience. So here we're not talking philosophy, we're talking about what we experience right here, right now. But it's on the basis then of what we have in the consciousness that we perceive outer objects. And that's where both physics and also Abhidharma and Pramana and so on, both you could say in the Buddhist context and also in the modern scientific context, they understand that there is no actual phenomena out there. They're images generated. In neuroscience, you would say this is generated within our brain. This is the imagery. We're not saying that there's nothing out there, but the imagery that we're experiencing is generated by our brain. In the brain, it takes place within there's nothing out there. There's just in the skull. That's neuroscientific explanation. In the Buddhist explanation, we have a similar understanding that yes, there is actually no reality of phenomena out there, and yet on the basis of our disposition, again, on the basis of our what's present in our consciousness, we will perceive particular objects. So that's where there's you could say, a great sort of agreement in terms of the illusory nature of our perceptions of phenomena out there. But the explanations are slightly different, and the scientific explanation still relies on a conceptual construction that attributes some reality to a brain, whereas the Buddhists would say even that is just a construct. And essentially, it's all just abides within the continuity of our experience. And that's where we refer to that fact that we do continually give rise to experience. That potential we refer to as the all ground, or the storehouse consciousness. So that's where, yes, we do on the basis of our, you could say, present embodied mind, where we operate with skandhas and elements, ayatanas, or rather you could say all the constituents of our person, as well as specifically to that the way that we experience, that we go through conscious experience on the basis of our 5 senses and also our mind. And that's then what is known, mapped within the Abhidharma. But that's where we talk about all of that experience that we have of something is really just something that is produced on the basis of object, a sense organ, and then a consciousness that is generated on that basis. So this is a big topic, and all I would like to say is this is something that is really worth pursuing. So that's where we really sort of generate faith in the teaching, beginning to understand the logic of it. So that's where Abhidharma and the Pramana is quite helpful. So fascinating. Is there any particular book that you would recommend that covers the area of consciousness and its production? Well, you know, very often one that I'm sort of a little bit recommending these days is something that is been produced by the what's his name, the Dalai Lama's translator, Geshe Thupten Jinpa, and he's put together a series that are called Science and Philosophy in the Indian Classics. And there's volume 2. I've recommended it in the Pramana class, I think, in the Sword of Wisdom. So volume 2, Mind, I think would be, you know, the kind of questions that you're asking there. I think you maybe already have it actually. I think we've had this discussion before. You probably already have it. I would recommend that one. Yes. And then also, well, recently we looked at Professor Stephen Goodman's Buddhist Psychology of Awakening, which is quite a you could say easy introduction to Abhidharma. But actually, in that book here that I'm recommending, also John Donne gives quite a good introduction to Abhidharma. So I think that might be quite helpful. Yeah. Okay. You know what? Maybe we'll leave it at that today, if that's all right with you. Yeah. So let's just stop here today. Although this is not a question, I have to say how much I appreciate your teaching. Oh, thank you. Sometimes it is a sentence, sometimes only a word that sticks to my mind for a whole week. No use in telling you which word, but necessarily expressing my gratitude. Very kind of you. Thank you. I'm glad if it's helpful. Yeah, thank you. That's great. Does the primordial state, Buddha nature, exist independently from an experiencer? No. In other words, just like the universe that arises in interdependence to a perceiver, does it also come into being because we are here to experience it? Sorry for the late question. Not at all. Okay, what we talk about in the Buddhist teaching is that primordially our nature is unconfused, but we've misconstrued it, just like if we got lost. So we sometimes give the example of somebody who's dancing that all of a sudden becomes self-conscious of the dancing, or the grain of sand that all of a sudden thinks, oh, I'm a special grain of sand. And all of a sudden there's this sense of not just individuality, but rather self-consciousness, and in the sense of me as separate from the object. And it's in that condition then that the nature of consciousness fails to know itself. It's really just a failure to know itself. So there's nothing separate from, it's nothing separate from the mind. You could say within the mind, and of course this is also where there's some discussions that sort of coincide with some of the discussions we have in Vedanta, which is where we then talk about Prakriti, Purusha, and so forth, where we talk about the experiencer and the experienced as being two separate things. But in the Buddhist teaching, we would say there's no basis for that division. And we really just talk about one mind that just has its, you could say, its light. It has its own brilliance. And that is all the various perceptions, but they are not seen as anything different. So that's where this is the foundation for the Buddhist take on non-duality. So we're not talking about, you could say, two different consciousnesses, just simply one consciousness in which there's just momentarily some confusion that's taking place. But within that confusion, yes, then everything appears in what we call the interdependence of cause and effect. But that's only within the, you could say, the perception of the confused, ignorant mind. So that's where then we talk about the 12 links of dependent arising and a sentient being that goes through lifetime after lifetime of having this experience. But the ground itself never moves. And all the Buddha is actually telling us to is just look, have a look at your own nature. And that's where this dimension of freedom takes place, really just from seeing through this you could say unfounded assumption of duality, which is really just ignorance in the sense of proactively ignoring. And then the Buddha prescribes proactively looking and seeing. So yeah, okay, I'm glad if it's helpful. Okay. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you very much. See you next week.